My name is Caroline Nyambura Muriu. I am a public prosecutor with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. When I arrived here and I got to the gate, the gentleman who served me tea happened to be someone who cooked for me when I was a very small girl. I am still small. But he said something and he said, finally ulikuwa wakili na hujakuwa mkubwa. And it brings a lot of memories being back here now as a senior prosecution counsel. Like I said, I work for the ODPP. I'm currently stationed in Murang'a. Everyone who is here, I want to start by saying that you are where you're supposed to be. So do not doubt that you would have stepped out. You're here because there's something I'm supposed to say that will make you happy or make you laugh, or you'll go home feeling like you've learned something, right? The second disclaimer I want to give is that the views that I shall give on here are my own. They do not belong to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution. But I will be open to answer a lot of questions that come from the ODPP. When I am not practicing, I do yoga and I crochet. So I like telling especially lawyers and would-be lawyers that, because I think there's this perception that all you do is read books. We don't get into that trap of always reading books. The books will always be there. But it's good to have something else outside law. When I was preparing for this earlier yesterday, I really wondered what I'd say, because I have 10 years of practice, and sometimes it's very difficult to be able to narrow down what do people want to listen, right? And I had this thought, should I just come and tell them how I wake up and go to the office and sign charge sheets? And then I go and tell the court, Your Honor, don't give out bond or such things. And I said, nah. So I'm here to tell you a story. And the thing about stories is it's always start very differently, right? There's no story that ever starts the same. For example, those of us who are on social media know that we are now in the December of the year. Do you guys know we're in the December of the year? From tomorrow, it's 1st December, officially in Nairobi, because from now till December 31st, it's a bash after bash. No good story starts with, I had tea. All the stories start with, uko wapi. How many can relate to that? Uko wapi. And the answer always is, unanitaka wapi. All the stories start differently. You always have a story of once upon a time. When I was a child, I did this. The Bible talks about in the beginning. When we were in primary school and high school, we wrote, my best holiday ever was when I traveled to. And then there was the lines that the school teacher would give you. I was woken up by a loud bang, and you're told to proceed, right? So I'm here to tell you how we tell stories and how I tell stories. And the thing about stories starting differently is you then start thinking about the end of the story, because you can't start a story that you don't know where it's going. Even when you'd visit your grandmother, she'd start a story when you're seated there, but along the way, she's giving more and more. The characters are growing. When you're watching a movie, it's the same thing. So what is my beginning? My beginning is I brush my teeth. That's why there's the toothbrush. This is from this morning, by the way. I was getting ready, and I still did not know what to put in the slides. And I put this because my friend told me yesterday, what's the first thing you do before you go to court? And he said, the first thing you do, Caro, is check yourself in the mirror. And I realized it's true, because you don't want to go before a judge with green things in your teeth or your suit looking, hanging. And the thing about practice is you don't see it, but everyone else will say, hell, na leo madam alikuwa nakaa ni kama yuko smart. So I brush my teeth, make sure that I'm going to talk to a lot of people that day, and I want to be fresh. And in this story, we are going to have people. This story of mine will also have other stories in between. So there'll be an exam at the end, and I have a suite here for the best student. So before we get here, so once I brush my teeth, I go to the office, right? And the thing about, if you had ever told me that I'd be a prosecutor when I was in law school, I'd have said no, impossible, not me. Now that I am here, I honestly do not know where else I'd be. Telling stories was always a thing I wanted to do. I always say that if I didn't do law, I'd probably have been in media because I strongly believe I have a very good voice. You people don't need to tell me, I know. So I think I'd have done that. But now that I tell stories for a living, I ask myself, how do I want to tell my stories? And I'll want to hear from you when I'm done because my presentation is 9 slides long. What do you think how do you think a prosecutor tells stories? What's this perspective that we have? And that's what we are going to get into. My stories as a prosecutor start from very different places. I don't like watching news. And it's not because of this current state this country is in, no? I just don't like them. But this job has made me want to know everything that's going on. So my stories start anywhere. It could be a phone call. It could be a text. It could be a newspaper article. It could be radio. It could be news. It could be anything. One time, like I said, now I'm stationed in Murang'a. Before that, I was stationed in Kabarnet, Baringo County. And the story I'm about to tell you will start here. It was a Friday afternoon, Friday mid-morning, around 10:30. Friday, those of us who know government offices, Friday nobody wants to be in the office that much. So I want to quickly peruse the files that I have to approve charge sheets and go to Nakuru. And then this file comes to my desk, and it has a lot of activity, these vehicles, and I'm wondering, okay, what has happened this time? And an officer brings me a file and tells me, Madam, angalia hii file. I look at it, and a lady has been brought with a charge of child neglect. And it was alleged that she had exposed her child to a harmful practice, which in this case was defilement. And the first thing I go is, remember the phone call? Somebody had called me and told me, please don't leave early, we have a very sensitive file. Everything in prosecution is sensitive. So this sensitive file comes, and once you learn that everything is sensitive, everything stops being very sensitive. Because you're sensitive and my sensitive, kidogo ni is different. The file gets to me and I ask the officers, where is the person who defiled the child? Because it doesn't make sense. If this is someone with parental responsibility, there has to be somebody else. Where is the male figure? Because that was what the evidence was coming out. And the officers are very shaky about telling me the story. But I'm not bothered because it's not my file. And I want to leave. I want to go to Nakuru and start my weekend. And now the next thing is have your ear to the ground. The lady takes plea and she's given a bond of 200,000, which she couldn't raise. And I leave it at that because this file has been allocated to court 3. I am in court 1. Where are we going to meet with this file? Do you guys see where we are going to meet with this file so far? No? Even I don't know where we're going to meet with the file. But I had my ear to the ground because I was very keen to know what is so special about this file that has come with the OCPD, the OCS. I'm getting phone calls. At the end of the day, I see a newspaper article about a child who was rescued. I ask, where is the child? Children officer tells me the child is, in a children's home. So I satisfy myself that there is evidence, and I move on. We take the plea. And then now we come to the preparation. Remember, you're building your character, you're building your story. So I start building my characters. That case sticks with me through the weekend. Now, what happened after, in the course of this case, is I got a transfer. A transfer that I had been looking forward to. So I'm also not very bothered about this file. But 2 weeks later, the file comes back to my desk. And it was so coincidental that every time it would come, there'd be no one in the office. It was always Caro is on duty. So I get there and I look at it. Now I look at it. Because now we have new charges. What charges are there? There's the lady, and there's a new charge. No, the lady was arrested in May, and we start building the next charge it's brought in August. And August, it was literally, I think, a week or 2 weeks after I'd received my letter of transfer. And the file, and nobody's in the office. It was something was happening that weekend. So all my colleagues have gone for bash because Caro is at the station. I look at the file. Now I really, really look at it. There's a 10-year-old girl here who has been defiled, and unfortunately she's now dead. And so we have to now lose. Now I'm being brought to decide, what do we charge her with? And we have an accused person. The accused person is brought to court. It's during COVID, so he has a mask. I don't get to see them. I'm always very curious to see their faces, and this is just personal. I call it, and I hope Senior won't hear this part. Please close your ears. I call it udaku. Sometimes we go to court even as we want to know what's happening in your lives. Our lives sometimes are boring. I want to know, ati mlifanya nini nyumbani, you know. So I look at, and I'm now curious, and I want to know what has happened. And it turns out the officers are coming to ask for custodial orders to have the suspect detained at the police station for 14 days. I quickly sign it off, and we go. There were good reasons. The guy has just been arrested. He had been a flight risk, blah, blah, blah. Now, this is where the story gets interesting, so please pay attention. 2 weeks later, they come. They still find me there. And I immediately tell them, you guys, file ni ya court 3, na mi niko transfer. Cheers, me I'm good. But madam, please just look at it. You're the senior one around. The evidence is overwhelming. But we can't decide. Do we charge the guy with defilement without a victim, considering the victim is now deceased? Do we charge with manslaughter? Do we charge with murder? And again, unfortunately, I'm still the only one. And now my boss is also on leave. So I have to call my boss's boss. Now, in the hierarchy of boss's boss, you don't want to call the boss's boss. You want the boss to call his boss. Hello, Mr. Kemo, my name is Carol. Because we are so many, we're 600 of us plus. So you have to introduce yourself, say where you're from. And I explain the situation. And I tell him, he tells me, review the file and give me your opinion. And so I do that. I do a brief and I write a nice letter. And that is, this review file is where everything is. In a day, I practice both in the high court and the lower court. When I'm in the lower court, I review a minimum of 15 files. And minimum 15 files because the station I'm in has less work. I know colleagues who review from 50 to 100 files per day. Charge sheets. It becomes so, you almost know the sections off the top of you. If you ask me what section 46 of the Traffic Act, I'll tell you. If you ask me what section 49 of the Traffic Act is, I'll tell you. And I'll tell you that the section 49 of the Traffic Act does not create an offense called careless driving. It creates an offense called driving with undue care and attention. I only knew that when my case was thrown out because we quoted the wrong section. I reviewed the file. It had 11 witnesses. And each witness is pointing to this gentleman having defiled the child. We have the statement of the child. Now I start asking myself, when did she record the statement vis-a-vis when did she pass? Is it a dying declaration? Can we use it? Who will produce it? I'm building my characters. I'm reviewing my file. Now I put those two tests there because a lot of questions we get is, how do you decide hii kesi ni ya kwenda kotini na hii si ya kwenda kotini? I'll always look at the evidence first, and I'll always look at the public interest. The evidence was overwhelming. I didn't have a problem with that. Sorry. Okay, I think I've done the wrong. The public interest is where things get tricky. Because public interest to me is not public interest to my colleague. Now, this case had a lot of public interest because on every single time it would come for mention, the court premises was full. And I just don't understand. Munatoka wapi? Munaenda wapi? I'm almost want to ask, is everything okay at home? To me, up until this point, nothing looks too out of place in terms of normal, for lack of a better word, normal everyday prosecution work. Now, the public interest is one of those tests that I have found difficult. My biases, my perceptions do not match everyone else. And bringing that objectivity is something that comes with time and experience. The first few years of me being a prosecutor, if you'd ever told me to consider public interest, I didn't understand it. Now I know that it's an objective and subjective test depending on which side of the pendulum you are. The case satisfies both, but we still have one problem. We can't decide what to charge with. Mr. Kemo gives me instructions to seek further days to have this person detained because he's going for an urgent meeting. He does not have time to advise me. So I go back to court. Your Honor, please, Your Honor, just add me 7 more days. That is a typical prosecutor. We are always begging, court ya haki na imani, and asking for a very final last adjournment. The court grants me. Again, public interest. Then now, I get the go-ahead to charge this person with manslaughter. I put victim needs there because, again, my 11 witnesses, when I was now preparing, I started asking myself, what do my victims and my witnesses need? My main victim is no more. So I'm now working with a victim that I do not know. Along the way, my ear to the ground is that there's a court that has refused to handle this matter. And I'm curious to know, why do they not want to handle this matter? And it turns out that the magistrate had visited the children's home where this girl was, had seen the state she was in. She was not comfortable handling it because of her bias. So it was decided that the only person who did not know these people was Court 1. Now, this file comes on Court 1, and I'm just like, you guys, I'm going on transfer. Please just someone else handle it. And they say, no, you're the one who will handle it. And now I start my case. My trial advocacy training and my many years, I have a PhD in law from watching The Practice and Boston Legal and Vioja Mahakamani. Because there are some things you will borrow from there that you will use in practice. Don't let anybody tell you, especially Vioja Mahakamani, by the way. You will learn a lot. And now I get here. Now, if you are a movie lover, you know this movie, Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. So I start first by listing down my good facts and my bad facts. I had very many good facts. We had a dying declaration, very, very comprehensive statement. We had witnesses who were able to detail everything that had happened. And I'll tell you what had happened to this girl shortly. But I had some major bad facts. My bad fact was that 3/4 of my witnesses were relatives of the girl and the accused, the gentleman. I had another bad fact that I don't have a victim to speak for themselves. So I have to use other people to get her story out, right? I had another bad fact, which is on point 5. There was a lot of interference. A lot. The stakes were too high. For everyone involved, I'm the only one who did not understand how high these stakes were. When I did my good fact and bad fact, and this is something I tell all lawyers, and it doesn't matter whether you're in litigation or not, it is very good once your client brings you your case, it's good to know what's your case about. And I know it sounds very out of the world, but it's as simple as asking yourself, reasonably, if I went to court, will I win this case or not? What do I want out of this case? Do I just want to smamisha so that a car is not auctioned? Do I want a judgment? What kind of judgment do I want? When I did my good facts and bad facts, I listed down my bail application as well. So when we went for plea taking is when the rubber started meeting the road. I walked in for plea taking. There were all these media houses. I don't understand. I'm like, okay, no one told me that citizens are coming. And everybody knows that I don't do media. Aside from the fact that, there's bureaucracy, I just do not want to be seen on TV. We get to court. I have an affidavit on bail bond, which is something that the magistrate in that court had not seen before. And I am ready, and I have all my discoveries ready. I have done my witness statements. I'm ready. But again, I tell him, Your Honor, we could transfer this case to another court because I'm going on transfer. He says, no. The other courts have refused. We will do it. And I say, but Your Honor, maybe another prosecutor can start. No. Just take the plea first. We'll deal with tomorrow later. The media goes, I am given, so I tell the court now that I am leaving, can we take priority dates then? Back-to-back dates. And he says, okay, you know what? I'm convinced we'll do that. Remember the lady we arrested in July? This is her husband. It's an auntie and uncle situation. So now between plea taking and hearing, he's denied bond because he's a flight risk, and that was fairly obvious. Then now we get to the hearing part of it. I have done all my statements, and I write a lot. So I have written down for each witness statement, what the questions I'll ask you, the questions I expect from the other side. I already start thinking, what will the defense bring out? What do I need to prove, and what will the defense bring out? And my notepad is getting thicker and thicker. Now, between plea taking and hearing, you know that light bulb moment when you're working on a document and then you wake up at 3 a.m., it just hits you. These two cases are separated. The gentleman is charged with manslaughter. The lady is charged with child neglect. And I ask myself, if I turn this lady to be a prosecution witness, won't I win this case? And I say, let me give it a shot. I call my boss and I give him the idea, and he says, try it. Now, this is an area, if you're from Baringo County, you understand it's a very culturally different area. That's the first area where I could not dress the way I am dressed because I understood that the hierarchy, the social hierarchy was very different. Every time I'd go to speak somewhere, I'd need a gentleman to introduce me, then I'd speak. At first, because, we are independent women, hey, you're like me, you're going to let me speak, until I realize, if I'm introduced by a gentleman, they listen to me. When I go kifua mbele, nobody listens to me. So I start talking to the lady. It took 2 weeks to convince her. And I get asked this question a lot, how did you convince her? It was the hardest yet simplest thing to do. I'd leave court and I'd go visit her in prison. And we'd just sit and talk. Habari ya leo, umekula? And we'd start there and we'd talk and talk. And I offered her the deal from day one. I told her, I am here, I can give you a deal. If you testify against your husband, I've been given the authority to withdraw your charges as long as I'm satisfied that the evidence you will give is necessary. And she's I can't testify against my husband. And it took 2 weeks of me involving the probation officer, a social worker, myself, her getting familiar with me and explaining to her what it means. And she has to stand. Here, as I'm still preparing, I remember spousal privilege. And I realized the problem is this is not her actual biological daughter. This is a niece that she adopted because her parents couldn't take care of her. But they stayed with this child for 3 years since she was 7 and she passed on at 10. And so I go back and I figure, what if I'm able to prove parental responsibility, which then gives me an exception under Section 127 of the Evidence Act, then she can testify against her husband. The day that lady was testifying, I wore my favorite dress. If you intend to do litigation, please show up in court smart. You know why? The day will go so badly, but you'll still look good. It's as simple as that. You will be standing there and everyone will be looking at you like you're being battered. But you still, because you left the house looking good. You looked at yourself and you're like, you know what? Bring it on. So that day I wore my best dress and I went, and I'm the only prosecution counsel. The defense has like 5 advocates, and I walk in, and of course there's like, ndio ule prosecutor. And I was known as the prosecutor, ule mdogo. So I tell the court that I want to call this lady, and the objections start. She's I'm like, give me a chance to lay my foundation. And I lay my foundation, and I asked her all the questions. Has anybody forced you to be here? No. Do you understand that there's a plea bargain on the table? Yes. What does that mean? She's able to explain. Tell us about this girl. And she says, I took her in. She was how did she refer to you as mother? And how did she refer to the accused as daddy? Do you have other kids? Yes. How do they interact? And then now the objection comes, and I defend it. I had an authority, and I tell the court, but this is parental responsibility. This child knew nobody else. These are her parents. And her biological parents, one was deceased, the other one was unwell. And the court agrees with me, and we go on. I examined her for an hour and a half. We had to take a break the next day for her to come and get cross-examined, and she was exhausted. And I could see her husband could not believe, the love of my life, you're testifying against me, which she did. And we gave her a plea deal. And once I was convinced and satisfied, we managed to withdraw her charges. Remember when I talked about victim needs? This is also another victim. A new problem arose. She had nowhere to go. Her in-laws had ostracized her. Her husband is in custody. Her family don't want her, because they're saying, we brought you our child, and our child is now no more. Where are you going? So I had to call her brother in Eldoret to come. We discuss where she will go. Is she safe? And this I'm all doing on the side. This is outside the hearing. I have to consider her, because I also don't want her to go home, and then tomorrow we have another case. The hearing went on. We did the hearing for about 2 weeks. I lined up my 10 witnesses. And we had one very critical witness who was the last person with the child. And she explained the last conversation they had with the child. I have been practicing for very long. I say very long because as far as I'm concerned, 10 years is a long time. And this is something that we don't humanize practice enough. When we see people standing in court, we see a lot of fight, right? We see a lot of anger. We don't ask ourselves what goes through their mind. When the social worker from the children's home was testifying, that was the first time I broke down in court. I'd never broken down in court. I wear glasses when I have bad cases because I'm an emotional being, and I don't want the judge to see me crying because nilie, accused alie, sasa nani anasaidia mwingine, witness wangu alie, you know. But that one, I remember crying, and I put my head down. The advocate watching brief stood next to me and held my hand. I remember him telling me, Carol, 5 more minutes. I was on the last page of my witness statement. The hearing went very well. I had numerous objections. Along the way, we had change of advocate. We had some witnesses refusing to come. In this building my character and reviewing my file, you know the direction I gave to the investigating officer? To make 3 copies of this file. Now, the last thing on this slide, everything that could go wrong or right, think about every possibility. I'm an overthinker, so this I do very well. I'll think about all the worst case scenarios. In this case, I thought about all the worst case scenarios. And one worst case scenario that I had, and I had written it down, is if my magistrate is transferred, are we going to start this case afresh? Guess what happened? Guess. He was transferred. The day he was transferred, I remember it was, I think, August 17th. I received that information. I parked my car on the side of the road and broke down. We are smack in the middle. You know that height of a good case? Like, sasa ndio kesi imeanza. And then this guy has to go. And then Monday morning, it was a Friday when I received the news. A Thursday. Monday morning, I went and spoke to him. And I told him, I hear you're going on transfer. And I asked, so what do you plan on doing? Like, how soon do you? It's like, no, we have to finish this case. So you're even going to finish, like, you have to bring these people haraka. I'm like, the God I serve is alive. Everything that could go wrong, all right? And in prosecution, a lot of things go wrong. A file disappears. Your witnesses are compromised. they are interfered with, they change their minds. Key witness ends up being a brother to somebody, and they're like, but there's no way I'm going to testify against my brother. Your key witness becomes that neighbor who, walisoma now you primary school. And they're like, nah, it's my drinking buddy. Everything that could go wrong goes wrong. On the day you have your critical witness is the day that a judicial officer you're appearing before has a very urgent official call, which they had not told you about up until this morning. That's the day your investigating officer is transferred to Garissa. And now you have to start looking for ways, and you have a very last final adjournment. So, unaenda kuambia koti nini? And everything that could go right goes right. Your magistrate is transferred, and he says, we are going to finish the case. You must have a vision, but you must be flexible. When I was preparing this case, I wanted a good judgment. But along the way, I realized I have to be flexible. There's so much that I do not have control over. So much. Because the criminal justice system has way too many players that you can't dictate everything. Actually, along the way, there's a hearing that defense counsel didn't show up because he did not have instructions. We all know what that means. He had not been paid his fees. And that's the day you have, you're ready to finish. And then you have to convince your witnesses who are coming from very far. If you're from Baringo, they travel vast distances to come to court. So they're asking you, madam, sasa tunafanya nini? Si ulituambia tukuje leo tutasikizwa. You learn how to manage them and tell them, I told you because I knew the case was going to proceed. There's not much else I can do. And you convince them to come again and again and again. Unexpected things come up. Now, a good ending needs teamwork. The judicial officer agrees for us to proceed with the case, and we finish. Then we take, because I was so prepared, I started making my submissions when I did my good facts and bad facts. So what I'd do is, at the end of the hearing, I'd just add what my witnesses said. PW4 said this, PW5 said this, PW6 said this. So that by the time it was coming to submission date, when I closed my case, when I was asked how long do you need, I told the court, give me 1 day and I'll have my submissions. And my magistrate looked at me like, hey, you're efficient. And I'm thinking, boss, me naenda transfer. You see efficiency, and there's a reason I'm putting this transfer thing there. You'll see why it now, in retrospect, why it mattered so much. We closed the case and we were given a defense hearing date, which we started the next week. And the defense brought 5 witnesses. If you intend to do practice and you find yourself defending people who have been accused by the state of one offense or the other, you can say, Caro told you this, huh? Don't have very many witnesses for defense. They come to haribu the case. It's very good to hear what the prosecution said, because now these 5 witnesses, they came to help my case. The accused gave unsworn evidence, which was not tested. So everything else these people said did not have that much, weight. We cleared this case October 5th, 2021. October 6th, I was in Nairobi. I left that morning and came to Nairobi. I didn't leave when the judgment was ready because the magistrate was on transfer. We listened to a total of 15 witnesses, and I can almost tell you what each one of them said. Because in all the trial advocacy trainings I'd ever done, I'd never gotten a chance to actually practice what I had been taught. This was one of the first cases that I consciously made an application to do opening statements. And everyone asks, prosecutors, mnafanyanga opening statements? We don't. We don't because of the volume of work we have. This one, because I had my own file under the bed, I had no choice but to do opening statements. And the court was very appreciative of it. And I did a roadmap at the beginning, and I said, I will be seeking to do an opening statement, which will only take 5 minutes. And I had diagrams. I'm very extra. So I had a whiteboard, and I had flow charts, and everyone was so mesmerized by me. And when you're standing there before your witness comes, you're the star of the show, and you want people to hear you. You want them to believe your story, so that when you bring the people who are telling the story, the court is moving with you. So I planned, and I really, really planned. But I was also open to possibilities. And many things, and because of time, I wouldn't go to all of them. Many things went the way they did. And now, in the end, what did I want? A conviction. Prosecutor tunapenda. The first 3 years of my practice, somebody asked me, do you like it when the judge says convicted and sentenced to life? Like, why are you happy? And I tell them, listen, it's not joy for what is going. It's all the work that I have done is coming down to this moment. And then I learned that people actually read my expression. So now, when the judgments are being read, I am writing stuff. I'm drawing and doodling. Because I did not realize that when I sit here, all of you are seeing my expression. And you can see how people start thinking, huyu prosecutor alituweka ndani kwa sababu akona uchungu na mimi. It's work. It's work in the extent that someone else, if it were not me, someone else would still be seated here and doing the same thing I'm doing. Right? It's just that I'm the one who's here. And again, remember we started with in the beginning and once upon a time. And then, then when you are giving these compositions you're given and then you end is, that is when I learned that every dog has its day, right? Or that is why it was my best holiday ever. You have all these endings. What do you want your story to achieve? How do you want your story to end? I wanted a conviction, badly. And I wanted a conviction badly because along the way, everything, everywhere, all at once, when the family of the girl found out that I was on transfer, I got a letter telling me I am not on transfer until I finish this case. So now I'm thinking, I was so ready to leave. And now instructions have come, you're not going anywhere until this case is over. And I ask, why are you guys giving me this work? Can't somebody else do it? Along the way, my P3 form got lost. I had to go to the hospital and ask for another one to be certified, come back, have the doctor there, seated there, like, usitoke, tuko karibu kumaliza, come. Because you want him to testify and move on with your day. January 2022, the judgment was read, and he was convicted. And he was sentenced to life. I am very invested in this case. He's now on appeal, and I'm helping my colleagues prepare the documents for appeal. This, of all the cases I have handled, this is the one case that broke my heart. This girl had been taken out of help. How you help your younger sister, right? And she started being defiled when she was 7 by her uncle in the house, outside there where there's Sukuma Wiki. How did they find out? She was on her way to school and she could not wear her sweater. So her teacher asked her, why are you not being able to wear her sweater? A sweater, because it's cold and it's drizzling. Her whole body was swollen. So she couldn't lift her hands up. And so the teacher was now more curious, like, ni nini inaendelea nyumbani? And the girl fearfully spoke and said, Baba has been defiling me. When it was found out, the whole village was informed. The girl had been told by her uncle that if you speak, I'll kill you. So when the girl found out that everyone else had found out and the chief was coming and people were now finding out what's happening, she ran away. She went to stay in the forest. So between May 18th and May 17th and May 20th, thereabout, they were looking for her. The whole village was looking for her. Now, remember we talked about having your ear to the ground? These things came as I was going on. That is why I now started seeing what the public interest, what the halabaloo was about. When the members of public would look for the girl during the day, this gentleman would look for the girl at night. You know why? She said, to kill her, actually. In her statement, she'd said, I could hear you people looking for me, but I was so scared, so she'd climb up a tree. When the uncle passes, then she'd climb down. And she survived on fruit, forest fruit, berries, and all that. When she was found, she was rescued. She was taken in one vehicle. Remember, this is now, so there are two families. There has the accused person's family and his wife's family, and everyone now wants to find out, mtu wetu ameshikiwa nini. When the police from Kabartonjo rescued the girl was put in one vehicle, and then somebody was now, they were tailing this vehicle to get her out so that they take her to hospital first. The family of the accused, the uncle, wanted to take the girl to hospital because they had a relative in hospital and they knew the P3 would come and say nothing was seen. And the other side knew if we go to hospital, there'll be something was seen. So the girl was switched into 3 different cars. That night she slept at the children officer's house. It was the safest place they could find her. Her statement was recorded by my investigating officer somewhere in, like no one knew where she recorded her statement. Along the way, the guy, once he found that the girl had been rescued, he ran away. You know where he went? To Eldoret, to Kitale. Eventually, he was arrested within the county. He was looking for a passport to leave the country. So in the course of us waiting for this case to come, somebody had told me, kuna jamaa tunataka kushika na akona passport. I didn't know it's this guy. When he comes, I'm like, oh, you're the one who's looking, in my head, I'm like, oh, you're the one who's looking for a passport. The day we took plea, he said he'd like to speak, and he asked, nataka kujua complainer wangu ni nani? As far as he's concerned, he knew, he had found out that the girl had died. So who would be complaining against me? What evidence is there? The people. The work we do is about the people. It's really not about me. Yes, I'm one of the people, but... So when I was going through this process and then I was getting this conviction, I had to ask myself, is this what the people want? And it's a very difficult question, and it's one of those I call it an unpopular opinion that I have, that justice is very different for all of us because of our personal biases, our perceptions, and biases are not bad things. For the accused person, being convicted was not the best thing for him. Yet, for the larger community, it was the best thing for him. Because we also learned that he had defiled his other children, and the girls in his home had run away and never come back because of what their father was doing to them. So at the end, when that judgment was read, I asked myself, is this reflective of what these people wanted? Considering that they might have known these things were happening and did not do anything about it. Then I remember the cultural setup of this community is the kind where it may not be as easy as me and you sitting here in a room to talk about some of these things. These are taboo topics. We don't talk about sex in the villages. We don't. Now, leave alone defilement where there's a minor involved. The father to the girl refused to bury her. Her biological father refused to bury her. And he refused to bury her because he said, yule mwenye alimfanya bibi mpatie akamzike. I had her eulogy in court. That was one of the pieces of evidence we put in. I wanted the court to fully appreciate her age, the circumstances she lived in. We had photos. We had quite a bit of things that we wanted the court to move with us. I was lucky because I got a very, very sober-minded magistrate. Has justice been done? This is a question I've never been able to answer in any of my cases. The reason being that, again, justice to me is not justice to you. What our books, the law books and jurisprudence keeps evolving because things are changing. And law is a social science. There's a lot of intersections that come. Yesterday, I was laughing with a friend and telling him that people don't realize how much law intersects with the society. So much so that in April, when we have the long rains, we have more house breakings than any other time in the year. You know why? It's raining. If I break a drawer, nobody's going to hear. When there's a full moon, there are higher reported cases of poaching because the poacher can see the animal. Yet you're just enjoying the full moon, but for someone else, they're taking advantage. When we have a society where a 7-year-old is defiled for 3 years and her cause of death was infection as a result of defilement. And that is how we managed to nail the manslaughter. And in my head, I thought, we should have gone for murder. But could I really prove mens rea? Did he defile with the intention of killing? No, he didn't. It's one of those where we had so many meetings about it. And we said, let's go for the one that's almost a sure bet. The last question I ask myself every time a case is over is, did I do my best? Did I prepare? Did I do my good facts and bad facts? Was I open to possibilities? Was I flexible? And if I was, it doesn't matter how the judgment goes. Is it an acquittal? Is it a conviction? As long as I can sleep at night, the rest is things that are not within my control. I told you I have 9 slides. See? People don't like I don't like PowerPoints, I know. The day, I never ended up meeting this girl. I'd not met her before she passed on. But, and when I told my family this story, they were very amused because the case became such an integral part of me that I'd see her in my dreams. I'd feel the weight of her burdens on my shoulder. Practice is like that. Nobody tells you this part. And you're told, leave the cases at the door. It's so easy to say that. I don't believe in work-life balance because there's nothing like work-life balance. Work is life. If you think about it, if my colleague annoys me and I come home, I'm also annoyed, right? Where is the work? Where is the life? All of it is part of life. And the balance is that. So while I'd finish the case in court, I'd go home and I'd see this girl's face. I'd hear the witnesses telling the story of how she had to be on diapers on her last days. The infection was so much, the doctors couldn't do anything. In fact, the pathologist, when she was testifying, she said when they opened her up, her insides were black because the infection had spread so much it was damaging her internal organs. And because she was so small, she had not formed, as a teenager or even as a preteen. And the defilement had been going on for so many years, there was nothing much. And the witness who told us her last moments told us that she said, the witness told the girl, forgive this person. And she asked, you've said I forgive them? Then it's okay. I'll forgive them. But don't worry, ma'am. Should now call the lady mommy. Don't worry, mommy. You won't have to wake up to change my diaper anymore. And that's the day she passed on. The day the judgment was read is the last day I ever had her in my mind. I felt like her weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Because now I was like, she got the justice that I wanted. The reason I give this case is because it's one of those very textbook cases. I say textbook because what I was taught trial advocacy is, I don't get to apply it all the time. There's no textbook case in prosecution. Everything has, you could have a really good case on paper, then you get to court and your witness just says, ule mwenye alipiga, unamuona kotini? Simoni. But it's this guy, and both of you know it's this guy, but he's just decided it's not the person. What do you do? Sometimes you want to beat the person, but you can't. You have a defense lawyer who comes, and this is my best, and I'll say it because senior is in the room. This is my favorite. I get counsels coming to court, and the first thing they ask, where is the prosecutor? And I'm like, I'm here. I see you're not a prosecutor. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's me. When I'm not wearing heels, I'm shorter than this. So they come expecting someone very big. My saving grace is I have a very strong voice. So when I tell the judge this and that, they're like, okay, that makes sense. Those kind of fights happen every day. And the reason I started by saying that I never thought I'd be a prosecutor is because the kind of emotional maturity it has given me over the last couple of years is absolutely amazing. You become very grounded and you stick with your case. And you also know when to let go. You realize this is not an application that's making sense, so why should you pursue it? And then you turn to a different trajectory. Now I prosecute in the High Court. I don't like it because 3/4 of my time is seeing crime scene photos because I do more murders. And yet, we are still able to tell the story. Every time there's a murder in Murang'a, my mother calls me, Nyambura, what is happening? Because it's coming to my desk, for sure. And I have to look at it. I have to prepare. I have to do my good facts and bad facts. I have to think about witness protection. I have to think about, are there children involved? Are they safe? Are they okay? Can they testify on a priority basis? So many things that run through my head. And that's part of this work. It's part of the advocacy. It's part of understanding that your work as a prosecutor is not to convict. And it's something that I and my colleagues struggle with, but the reality is our work is not to convict. Our work is to give all the facts, good, bad, and ugly. Let the court make the decision. I do not hide evidence, and this is just personal practice. Or a bad fact, I don't. I want my story to come out with a bad fact. I always give this analogy. If you have kids and they break a glass, when a kid comes and tells you, Mom, I broke the glass when I was washing dishes, I'm very sorry. And when a child hides it, the likelihood of the one who hides it is the one who gets punished more than the one who comes out and says, I broke. So I want the judge, the magistrate, the judicial officer to hear the bad facts from me, because then I'm able to fix them. If it's an investigating officer, why didn't you go to the scene? I did not go to the scene because my colleagues from the post had gone to the scene and collected the necessary documentation. I don't leave it to the defense to bring that out. I want to bring it out myself. And the good thing about that, of course, you have to be wise about how to bring it out so that you paint your client in good light. You end up being more credible, more believable. Because I spend more time in court, and I tell private practitioners this, it becomes a relationship with your judicial officer. I probably see my judge more than I see my boyfriend. 8 to 5, we are together, fighting, no applications, begging for adjournments. You create a relationship. How does a relationship move without trust, without credibility? When I'm begging for an adjournment, when I'm asking the court to give me priority hearing, it's doing that because of the trust we have created. And as a prosecutor, I cannot afford to hide the bad facts, because then I kill the trust for all the other cases. I have seen brilliant defense counsels. When I was in Cabernet, I met this advocate who took the court through. It was a murder case, and the victim had been hit on the head. And he came with a full picture, a whole skeletal thingy for the head. And we were taken through science. And I remember sitting there in awe. Because this was not law. This is, 1 minute, right? This is science, but he was able to help us understand. Like I said, my presentation was not going to be like legal stuff. Cindy, mine was just going to be fun times. If you find yourself on this side, go with a human face. People really appreciate a human face. Walk into a courtroom and greet people. Let them feel the humanity in you. Prosecutors are bad people. Our work is to convict. But walking in and kusalimia watu, it changes everything. They see you as human. They understand that you're here to do a job that's difficult, but someone has to do it.
I have done a paper on closure in dispute resolution, and largely on cognitive dissonance and what it is that actually justice means to the person, which is the question you have been asking. And the question I'll ask you is very simply and frankly, do you ever ask the person standing on the other side what justice is to them, the family, and of bringing in the interplay of ADR and other avenues of dispute resolution, and going back again to Baringo and probably the frameworks that are set in place, and giving reference to the authority in there's this Somali case where then the murder case was thrown away and they were referred to community dispute resolution. So in such a sense, and you have a very good case, you have done due diligence, you have prepared, you have your good facts, your bad facts, you have had the entire interplay, and then at the end of the day, the client is like, I'm sorry, but wazee wamekuja, and the decision is that we are not going to proceed with the charges. And I know despite the mediation system and the dispute resolution system in Kenya is not so robust as to encourage such, because then it is whoever it is versus the republic. And what then is your personal opinion on the same?
For the longest time, I thought biases were a bad thing. It's only now that I'm really embracing that biases need not be a bad thing. I get a lot of those. For example, I'll give you an example of what we are doing now in Murang'a. When I went to Murang'a, I have a good track record. I forgot to start by saying this. I am not good at my work. I'm very good at my work. And it's something that I wear very proudly, because I hold the strong opinion that some of these jobs, for example, what I do, need to have the people in mind. There needs to be a people perspective. And when I went there, I was given a court that had a lot of work. In 6 months, I had cleared that backlog. I'm good at managing my diary quickly and being able to engage people at the grassroots. I go to police stations a lot. I'll meet with my officers for lunch, just to also understand what challenges they have and see how I can bridge that. Now, because of that, my boss decided to take me to the High Court, where we have now also reduced the backlog. We started the High Court with about 500 matters. Now we are at 200 and something, and reducing. You know what has helped us? Plea bargain. Every time you hear a murder, you think about a gruesome thing, right? This CSI and kind of things. And then you get to the ground. People kill each other for the smallest of things. Those stories you see about 50 bob, that's actually what causes them. And I don't ask the accused, what does justice mean to you? Sometimes I don't need to. You can see it. I've had an accused who came and told me, yes, this is my best friend who died. I was involved and I do not know what to do. You can see that he's also struggling with what is in front of him. And so for me, it's a case-to-case basis. What the officers bring to me, because officers paint the worst light of a murderer, right? But when you actually go to court, you look at the person and you actually can't, what is it? The English has gone. You can't reconcile the offense with the person that's standing there. And so I start interrogating the family. I have had families who come and tell me, tumemsamehea. Now, the only thing we tell them is tumemsamehea, yes, hakuna shida, but there has to be a pinch because there's a larger state. I'm not just here to protect the family, I'm here to deter other people from doing this. So take a plea bargain, have that as your mitigation. It's on a case-to-case basis. We are currently grappling with AJS. What's AJS? And now the framework that's out there is that every station will create its own sort of parameters. What does that look like? Who do we involve? Who do we not involve? There are certain communities that have very good structural chief, sub-chief, or elder, like the Murius with injury checker. It's very clear. Other places don't have that. Think about even Nairobi. Who do you call to framework AJS? There's so much diversity. It's a cosmopolitan place. How do you do that? So what we have employed and what I now do is I am open to the possibilities, but I am guided by the law. So I will explain that the family wants to withdraw. They are offering a plea bargain. Is it something you're open to? But madam, nataka kwenda nyumbani. Because to them, kusameheana ni kwenda nyumbani. Yeah. And I have to explain over and over again. It's a lot of work. With time, we have seen them accepting that and understanding that it's not just a scot-free. There has to be a pinch. It's different for the smaller offenses, obviously. I offer plea bargains from day one when I'm in the lower court, depending on the offense. If it's a small assault case, I'll always, even as I'm approving the charges, I'll ask, is the complainant around? I'd like to talk to them. We have, if you work within an agricultural area, you'll find theft of farm produce. The mandizis are 3,000, which to us are small things. To that person, hii ni ndizi ya kukula mwezi mzima. So I have to also consider that. It's a very tough balancing act, is what I'll say. But I'd be interested to read your paper, by the way. So I'll I'll give you my email and you can send it to me. I think there's still a lot more growth. And I would love to see more people outside the legal profession put in their views. Because again, it's about the people. We could be practicing law that doesn't resonate with our people. Then what are we doing? Especially if you are in this kind of system that I'm in. Of course, for other branches, it's different. But for criminal justice, people need to understand. And you need to communicate to them in a way that helps them understand that the power is with them, but to a certain limit. Yeah. Any other question or comment? I have. Yes, and then at the back.
Okay, good evening. My name is Sylvia. My question is, the moment I imagine about a prosecutor, I see a client to a therapist. So I would love to ask, when you flip the coin on the other side, what's the most rewarding aspect of being a prosecutor?
The most rewarding moments I have, and I experience a lot of them, is, Madam, asanti, nilielewa. And it took me very many years to understand that. Having a client or a victim of a crime come to me and say thank you, and especially where there's an acquittal. Because it then means I presented my case, they were able to understand why the case did not meet the threshold. Just that. And it's very tickling in our office at the moment, because I have a client who comes from very interior Muranga, and he comes to Muranga Referral Hospital for his clinic. When he's done, he comes to sit in the office to wait for me. So every time they find him, like, nangoja madam wangu ule mdogo. So they call me and they're like, mzee wako amekuja. And he just wants to come, greet me, we talk, and then he goes home. That, and this is a struggle I still have to date. Because how do you convince yourself and people that people saying thank you is enough? Being a prosecutor is a very thankless job. No one sees this work. We see the cases that are withdrawn on TV. Even us, we see them. And we're like, what's happening? Yeah? But that, me interacting with people, has been the most rewarding. The biggest strain, yet the most rewarding. When I go to train people, the look on their faces, and when they understand the rights of an accused, I go home happy.
Yeah. You say that at times, everything could go wrong. Yeah. And that day when that judgment was read, I believe that was one of your best days, right? So what if it never acted in your favor? Would your story be the same? Mm-hmm. Do you think justice would have made sense to you then? Do you think you did your best? If it never worked in your favor, would you be the same person today? Would the story be the same? And would you stand there and tell me the same?
Okay. I'll answer it twofold. One, I don't know how I would have reacted, because that's what I'd call an alternate universe. I don't know. I would have felt bad. I do feel bad in certain instances when I've put in a lot of work. With time, I have learned that when I started, the guys were in the room, I told them, you're where you're supposed to be. I am quickly learning that. There's a lot of things, and this is maybe a bit out of law. I think as human beings, we imagine there's so much we have control over. We don't. We have very little. In fact, the only moment you have control over is the one that you're seated here listening to me. And once I started appreciating that, and I use this case because it had a very significant turning point in all aspects of my life. And that was one of the questions I asked. Surprisingly, when the judgment was read, I was not present. They didn't tell me the judgment was being read. I read it in the newspaper. Because a colleague wanted the glory of that judgment, but didn't do the work. So everyone is telling him, you guys did well, but he's not telling people that he's not the one who did the work. And I had to go back and ask, was I looking for the glory, or did I want a conviction? Let nobody lie to you that they don't like glory. That's a lie. We all want to be appreciated. We all want to be told, good job. I wanted to be told, good job. But I was not there. I was in Muranga prosecuting other cases. So what do? I pat myself on the back. Would my story have been the same? Highly likely. in terms of the shift, the change of heart. And I've had cases where I've prepared like this and gotten acquittals. And those ones, you go home, you first sit down, you ask yourself, where did I go wrong? It takes you 2 days to come out of it, and then you pick yourself up and you go. Litigation is about rebuilding every time. And then maintaining that standard is now where the trick is. Because you can have so many losses, and then you're like, so why am I trying? How do you maintain the good work throughout? It's difficult. Along the way, one of them will come down because you don't show up the same way all the time. And I am very proud of this judgment, but I'm equally sad. This girl should not have died in the first place. The community failed her. We failed her. All for what? For me to get glory. And yet, there are things that happen, bad things that happen, so that you shine, which have nothing to do with you. If a case comes on your desk and it's the case that changes your trajectory of your practice, that was not your intention. You're just doing a job. But this bad thing had to happen for you to be elevated. And once I started understanding that, I carry them with a different weight. Yeah. I hope I've answered your question. Yes. I think there's a last question at the front, then we can close.
Concerning the presentation, which was impeccable.
Thank you.
There was a part you talked about where your safety was a little bit in danger because people used to break into your house and try to access the file. So as you're working right now in the High Court dealing with criminal cases, aren't you afraid that this instance or this occurrence is prone to happen again? And does it change your view of, am I in the right path, or should I change because of my safety? Because as much as I'm a prosecutor, I also need to be present there safely, health-wise, to be able to continue with this career.
When I was downstairs, I met one of my friends, and he told me, you must tell them that story. I got in loggerheads with my magistrate who gave me this judgment because one time he didn't show up to court, and I was getting angry. And I've been kicked out of courts. And magistrates are like, I don't want to see, and this is how they say it, I don't want to see that small girl in my court tomorrow. And most times it's because I'm questioning. And I have tried not to question, because when you work within the system, you learn how to temper your emotions. But I don't know how else to work. So lazima nitakuuliza maswali, you know? And I believe in conversation, and I'll tell the judge, honestly, this cause list is not manageable for me. And even my current judge, I had to have a discussion with her about the cause list. I told her, give me 5 matters and I'll deliver. Do I worry about my safety every day? Will it stop me from doing my work? No. I see the value of it. When I go back to, I joined prosecution when there were still police prosecutors, and I was trained by them. And I see the difference. There's definitely a big difference. And even us advocates appreciate, there's a very big difference when you walk into court and see a fellow advocate on the prosecutor's desk vis-a-vis a police officer. You know that this is someone you can have a discussion, a sober discussion, a legal discussion with. It gives me a lot of satisfaction. Will I do this for the rest of my life? Probably. Will I? I don't know. I am, again, very open to possibilities. If today an opportunity comes for me to travel the world, I'll take it and start that as my new career, you know? But I know I want to add more value in the system. There's a lot more work. I don't move on afraid. And that's why I said things like greeting people removes the barrier. People start seeing you as a human being. You start seeing people as a human, the accused person as a human being. So that when they raise their hands and say, Yona date si convenient kwangu, you don't look at them as someone who has committed a crime. It's not convenient for them. Just like 1st of September is not convenient for you. It's very small, I think you can hear from my presentation, it's very small, mindful changes that I go with. I've not had any incidences in Murang'a. Kabarnet, I was even, so many things happened in that station. People used to follow me home, and I'd still not worry. I'd still show up. I'd still show up afraid. I'd still do it. I've had colleagues who've had worse experiences. And of course, if it gets to the point where it's threatening my actual life, I'll ask to move. But so far, so good. I think it also helps that I'm small, so no one really... Honestly, when I wear jeans and go to court, no one knows it's me. I have a way of camouflaging and looking different, yeah. But I'm still going to do it. Yeah, I'll still do it afraid. Up until the universe decides otherwise, I'll still do it. Yeah. I think the questions are over. Thank you so much for listening to me. Before he comes to kick me off this stage, you know when you're called to speak somewhere, you don't know if people will come, and you don't know if people will listen, so I'm very grateful, and I hope you've learned something. Thank you very much.